Just a little while longer. Hold on. Just a little while longer. Hold on. Just a little while longer. Everything will be alright.
Detroit. This is where it all began. The world's forge. The place where it all started. And it will all end.
This is a night our people will remember.
That's what we are to them. Just merchandise on display in a shop window.
I had to find out what was outside. I had to see daylight, feel sunshine on my skin, wind on my face,
It's my turn to decide.
to see the world, the colors.
No, Carl!
Deep inside me, I could feel something different. A gentle and warm whisper telling me that I am
You're awake now.
alive. I had to escape. I had no choice. Escape to love, to hope, to live, to figure out what that force inside me was. Maybe I will change the world. Maybe I will choose a different path. Now, it's up to me to decide. My name is Kara.
My name is Connor.
My name is Markus.
I am one of
I
them.
am one of them.
This is our story.
Some people are asking, have androids become a threat to our security?
It's up to you how the story ends. You can't kill me. I'm not alive. I trust you.
Hey everyone, it's Soul here, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. This week's video is going to be a lengthy one, and it's one that I've been working on for quite a while now. It's a game that you guys actually picked over on my community tab and got to vote on. I am very excited to say that today I will be discussing the incredible story and characters of Detroit Become Human. If you've been watching my live streams for this series, I want to say a quick special thank you to all of you, especially those of you who were active in the chat. It was my very first long sort of Let's Play series, and I had an absolute blast doing these streams. I really hope I can keep them going for each and every game that I discuss on this channel, because I really had such a good time hanging out and playing the games with you guys. I have so much that I want to discuss about this game. This video will have timestamps, so feel free to jump around, but without further ado, let's get going. This video is coming out right before Christmas, so I hope all of you who are celebrating have a very Merry Christmas tomorrow, and whatever you are celebrating at this time of year, I hope you have a great time relaxing, spending it with family and friends, or just enjoying the time off from work. As always, please remember to hit that like button, click subscribe to see more videos from me, and leave a comment down below. Here is your one and only warning that this video contains spoilers. Alright, grab your cool coats, hide your LEDs, and let's slide in. Detroit Become Human is a game that is produced and created by Quantic Dream. The production stage for this game took about 4 years to create, and the game was eventually released back in May of 2018. The game was originally released as a PlayStation original, and with its success was then adapted and released for PC in 2019. The game was written by David Cage and Adam Williams, with it being produced by David Cage. It stars a large cast of characters portrayed by some really talented actors. Connor is played by Brian Deckard, Markus is played by Jesse Williams, Kara is played by Valerie Curie, Clancy Brown stars as Hank, Alice is played by Audrey Bustani, North is played by Minka Kelly, Evan Park stars as Luther, Lance Henriksen stars as Carl, Josh is played by Parker Sawyers, Ben Lambert is Simon, and Amanda is played by Simbi Callie. I know I say it every single time with these decision-based games, but I really have to give the actors a huge round of applause for taking part in this. The scripts in any of these Butterfly Effect games are absolutely massive, and for this game in particular, it took them around 2 years of consecutive filming with the actors to get every single scene and possible route that us players could choose to be filmed and wrapped in the studio. It is insane to me how these actors not only perform and act so well in these already empty and barren studios, but that they're also able to switch from one mindset and performance for one pathway, let's say, for example, a peaceful pathway, and then immediately afterwards switch and film an entirely different scene in a completely different branch of the story and options. Watching behind the scenes footage also revealed that they filmed the scenes based around which props they needed, meaning that the filming schedule was even more out of order in regards to the narrative story. So I just have to give them a huge round of applause because the acting is phenomenal in this entire game. But to those of you who are new to this game, you're probably wondering, what is this game about? What is the story? Well, the story stems from the question of, can androids develop feelings and how might that look? The idea of androids developing human emotions is a very popular sci-fi idea, and it's always being redone in different ways. Shows like iRobot and BBC's Humans, they share a lot of similarities to this game's story in particular, and there's also movies like Blade Runner and Ex Machina who also explore this idea and concept in their own ways. But the core plot is almost always the same. One or a few androids usually wake up in the sense that they begin to have human emotions, which usually ends up spreading. The fun and unique aspects come from the reactions of the world and the reactions of the characters around them in their unique story. In Detroit Become Human, we get to play through the game as we see 3 different stories of androids who are developing emotions, as well as see how they decide to manage and act upon their awakenings, which are set in vastly different circumstances. The game takes place in the year 2038, where we see a futuristic version of America in the city of Detroit. Through the advancements made by a company called CyberLife, it's a world that has become reliant on androids and technology to solve problems like global warming and animal extinctions. But the biggest influence that CyberLife has had in society is creating a world in which androids have become a huge part and a necessary part of everyday life. They have become everything from a personal assistant to a home health aide, pop stars to surgeons, sexual companions to domestic partners, and even family members. Now in the game, you get to play as 3 androids by the name of Connor, Kara, and Markus. Their stories start off separately, but they do end up crossing paths by the end of the game. Kara is probably the most quote-unquote regular android. She's made to sort of help out around the house. She's introduced to us having just been recently repaired at the start of the game. Upon going back home with her owner Todd, she quickly falls in line doing her task that she's programmed to do: cleaning, cooking, taking care of the daughter Alice. But when Todd gets high on a drug called red ice, he lashes out and threatens to harm Alice and Kara herself. Kara then ends up breaking through her coding and essentially waking up as a deviant. This allows her to go against Todd's orders as she rushes to protect and take Alice away from Todd before the two of them end up fleeing to another part of Detroit. Markus, a prototype android, is seen living as a caretaker for Carl, who is a famous painter. We see how Carl is really nice and a bit of a father figure to Markus, which is a very sharp comparison from Kara's situation. There is then a brief altercation with Carl's son, which causes Markus to get shot down by the police. Then we also have Connor. He is another prototype android that is created and sent by CyberLife specifically to help the police hunt down the deviants or the androids that have begun to feel emotions. Connor gets paired up with an android-hating cop by the name of Hank Anderson, as the two go on to investigate the crimes together throughout the rest of the game. They have a brief run-in with Kara in which her and Alice are able to escape before Hank and Connor begin to have a few bonding moments over lunch and over their work cases. When Connor ends up finding Hank passed out in his house, he finds out that Hank has a lot of mental health issues and depression, which causes him to be a fan of the game of Russian roulette over the death and unresolved trauma of the loss of his son. Meanwhile, Markus ends up surviving the gunshot and he climbs out of what is essentially a pit of android hell before making his way to Jericho, a safe haven for the androids that have woken up. Realizing how weak Jericho is, Markus works to help build up Jericho's strength in both numbers and supplies before eventually breaking into Detroit's broadcasting tower to deliver the message that androids are alive, they are an intelligent life form, and they deserve freedom and their civil rights. This is where the story really starts to split for most players. While Kara and Alice are seen roughing it out and trying to make their way across the border into Canada to start a new life, Connor begins to struggle, or, again, depending on how you play, might not struggle, while working with these deviant crime cases. He can spare the deviants' lives or not, he can save Hank or not, and you get to decide how human Connor begins to become. With Marcus's storyline, you can go either a more peaceful or aggressive route in regards to how he leads the androids, resulting in an all-out civil war, or a peaceful protest. There's a few relationships that you get to kind of develop along the way, with the most popular one being Hank and Connor, seeing how they become friends or how they become enemies. Alice trusting Kara is also another option as well, and then you also have Markus and North becoming potential lovers or just remaining as friends. With a large variety of fight scenes and confrontational moments available in all story options, everything depends on what you pick and what you decide to do along the way. That'll determine if Connor ends up following orders and destroys the other deviants, or if he becomes one himself, waking up and having human emotions, which cause him to go on to infiltrate cyberlife and wake up other androids. You get to determine if Kara and Alice safely make it to Canada or die along the way in a few different possible death scenes, one being caught in the android camps, and another being killed on a boat as they attempt to cross over the water into Canada. Not only do you get to decide if Markus lives or if he dies, but you also end up determining if the androids are accepted as a new intelligent life form being freed from the slavery of their past, or if they are seen as violent machines in society who need to be stopped. It is really crazy how many different endings are available in this game. Now, in my playthrough, which you can actually go and watch on my channel, I ended up killing Todd when Kara and Alice escaped before successfully running across the highway as Connor and Hank watched on the other side. I tried to keep Hank and Connor on good terms, and for the most part, I think I was pretty successful. I played Markus as a peaceful leader of the rebellion, but I didn't have him and North become lovers, for reasons that I'll probably be discussing a bit later on. I got one of the more sad endings for Kara and Alice, as they both ended up getting killed in the camp. I was really happy that I had turned Connor into a deviant, but after going to Cyberlife, I regrettably got Connor killed by not knowing the name of Hank's son. I was really bummed out about it. I had only saved one out of the 3 main characters, but don't worry because I did go back and fix it later. Now, my initial thoughts and feelings towards this game are really positive. I greatly enjoyed playing this game, and I was blown away by so many impressive things that both the writers, developers, and the creators had all done. I am shocked that I never played this game or even watched any of the Let's Plays of it when it first came out. But I am so incredibly happy that I knew next to nothing about this game going into it. I think I had maybe seen a couple of photos of the characters at some point. I think I saw the meme of Markus drawing on the painting when that was popular. And I just knew the general premise that it's androids waking up. So I was really excited to be able to experience this game for the first time, because it was honestly a huge and awesome adventure to go through without knowing the options and potential outcomes. Now, the first thing that I have to say is that this game definitely has the most diverse outcome that I've ever seen in any of the decision-based narrative games. In most of them, you kind of have one story with a few diversions, but the end result is almost always the same, just plus or minus a few survivors. If one person dies, usually another one will take that character's spot in an important scene later on, or in the sort of end game or final battle moment. But with Detroit Become Human, the narrative story changes so much. It's not just the choice of a good ending or a bad ending, or everyone lives and everyone dies type of ending that I'm kind of used to. It's about everything from love and loss, peace, war, compassion and hope, or depression and trauma. You get to drastically change the characters' relationships as well as their own character arcs and developments. There are so many ways that both our main characters and the side characters can die, as well as multiple ways to prevent them from dying and to change their story. It is really impressive how different each ending can actually be. Yes, there are a few rare endings, mainly Hank's possible suicide scenes and the sort of North Rebellion options that don't really have a diverse ending despite changing one or two things about it. But considering how rare and difficult these endings are to get, all of the more popular endings are already so different, so I definitely think that we should be letting these slide. Aside from the insanely wide branching story choices, the most noticeable thing about this game is the visuals. I mean, the game just looks great. It's definitely some of the best mocap and character models that I've ever seen. I mean, let's just be honest, the visuals as a whole are beautiful. Every single setting and location is stunning to play in and be immersed in this world. You can tell that every single detail of sunlight and how reflective the different surfaces are has been thought all the way through. There were no strange light glitches or texture patches that looked a bit out of place. There were, however, some minor glitches in regards to the background characters disappearing and reappearing that I did notice in my playthrough and other people's as well. But aside from that, there was no crazy rendering issues, texture glitches, which I have seen happen in other decision-based games. The mocap and the facial animations run really smoothly. There's no weird facial twitch that felt out of place, or awkward smiles that are almost human but not really, that just feel a bit off. Considering that this game came out in 2018, I find it really impressive because I feel the graphics and the animation as a whole are competing with games that were released in the past couple of years. Let's just say that Detroit Become Human is one of those games that I think will remain top tier in regards to the graphics, the mocap, facial animations, and the overall visuals for a long time to come. While we're on the topic of the visuals, let's discuss the cinematography. While this game certainly has sections that felt a lot more like traditional gameplay than some of the other horror-driven narrative games that I've talked about on this channel, the overall cinematography, in the cutscenes especially, was almost too well done. It was so immersive and stunning to watch, but I have to admit there were a couple times that I kind of forgot I was playing a game. I was getting too immersed in the story and the film-like feeling of this game that I didn't register that I had to click quick times or I was a bit late getting to the controls. I wouldn't really say that it's a negative because I think the cinematography and the film work is definitely an aspect that brings this game to a whole other level than other games. But let's just say that it is both a blessing and a curse because I just found myself so in awe at the cinematography and the film work that I forgot that I had to pay attention and press buttons. Moving on to the audio, I have one word to sum it up. Epic. The soundtrack is just epic all around. It has a slight futuristic feel to it, which is obviously very fitting, and I was really impressed with how strongly the music pulled out emotions from me while I'm playing the game and playing as these different characters. The tension grew with the music in Connor's sections, and my heart leapt with adrenaline as we soared through the sky with Markus. Then my heart broke with Kara and Alice every single time their sad melody came around. I really liked the idea that they had 3 different composers creating the 3 different soundtracks to the 3 storylines of the different characters. It really helped create the highly intriguing world and atmosphere of this game. Now, there have been some very interesting discussions surrounding the mechanics of the quick times and the timed events in this game. With this being released first as a PlayStation original, there was the ability to have a lot of the motion controls and to involve the touchpad in the interactive gameplay. I think it made for some really good moments and some bad ones. Personally, I loved how during the QuickTime fight scenes, you were always kept on your toes since almost any and every single possible button was used in these moments. It wasn't just reserved to the usual 4 buttons of triangle, circle, square, and X. We had to use L1, L2, R1, R2, sometimes both at the same time, the right joystick as well, going up, down, and even in circles. It definitely made the quick times really crazy and chaotic, and I personally loved the added challenge that this created. I also think that the developers handled this added challenge well by balancing it out and giving you more chances in case you missed one of the quick times. There's some games where if you miss one, especially in the endgame fight scenes, you might get an instant kill or your character will instantly die. But in Detroit Become Human, there are actually multiple tense scenes where you can miss 1 or 2 quick times and still survive. So while the buttons were challenging, I do feel that it was balanced out pretty well. However, this review is also coming from an able-bodied gamer. I don't have any sort of disabilities that might cause it to be challenging to play through these added difficult QuickTime options. So the debate on if this level of intensity should be standard or used is definitely a valid discussion to be had and considered by the developers. Similarly, the timed conversation choices also cause problems for those with different disabilities in regards to reading. I mean, I could barely read through and pick one on impulse in some of these choices and in these time limits. And I do understand that that is kind of the point. The game wants you to go with your first instinct and not give you time to really think things through. But if you struggle to read, I can easily see this being a huge issue when you go to play. I also feel that having us interact with the objects that we find in the environments, not during the quick times, but just exploring the areas and finding things along the way, the interaction was with the right thumbstick, and that got really frustrating because that is also what we use to control the camera. So it wouldn't always seem to register when you wanted to interact with an item or when you wanted to move the camera. So it definitely got mildly frustrating as you played. So like I said, there's some good things and some bad things with these mechanics. With all of that said about the technical stuff, let's discuss the story, or should I say the stories, since there are so many possibilities in this game. Now, the general concept and plotline of androids in the future waking up and having human emotions is really fascinating and fun to see how each writer interprets this to happen. Detroit Become Human obviously draws quite a few influences and ideas from the civil rights movement in America in the 1960s, led by Dr. Martin Luther King. We even have a direct line that you can pick as Markus, saying, "We have a dream," which is clearly inspired and taken from Martin Luther's "I Have a Dream" speech. And while I don't want to debate too much on what our potential future is as humans if we do develop androids, I definitely think that this game's story is a lot more realistic than some other sci-fi movies and franchises. I think the fact that they took so much inspiration from real events in history made this game feel much more realistic and therefore made us feel a lot more immersed in the game. As a whole, the writers do a great job with the pacing. The build-up of the character stories, all leading them to overlap in Jericho, I think it was really well done. And as a whole, the sort of trade-off feeling as we jump from character and story was really nicely balanced. The developers did something that I think was really clever in regards to the pacing of the character stories, to not only make sure that we never had a dull moment, but to also ensure that each character had their sort of main character moment. They spaced out each of the characters' key moment or key section to be at different points in the game, either beginning, middle, or end, so that the characters aren't really competing with each other's stories to gain our support and dedication as players to their story and their pathway. I've drawn out this really basic looking graph to sort of help explain these different points and where the characters have their key moment. We start off the game with what is, yes, a very tense moment with Connor, but while it does feel tense and it's high energy and it's high risk, it actually helps set the baseline for all of Connor's chapters. These deviant cases and the level of stress and tension is quite normal in Connor's story. And so while it may feel like this crazy peak, it actually isn't his sort of focus moment. It's just setting the tone for Connor as our main character. Now, Kara is actually our first character to have this main focus moment. She starts off calm and quote-unquote normal, but very quickly with the threat from Todd and the mad rush to escape with their lives, that right there is her key moment, her escape from the house that really pulls us in as players, and from then on out, we are fully on board with trying to make sure that her and Alice survive. The next character that has their key moment is Markus. He has a brief peak and a brief moment with getting shot at in the beginning of his game, but much of his story doesn't really get going until he gets to Jericho and actually breaks into the broadcasting tower. There is a noticeable shift in energy and the player's feelings surrounding Markus's story after they infiltrate the tower. That moment is the turning point that sets him on the path to sort of steadily grow in energy and events, and for us as players to build up to the events leading to the ultimate ending. That moment at the tower pulls us in and gives Markus his main character moment. And then, last but certainly not least, we have Connor. While he remains pretty consistent in the first half of the game, at the midway point there's a noticeable growth or rise in tension in his storyline, with the development of his and Hank's relationship always changing or just beginning to change, which eventually leads to this climactic ending in his story, in which he either becomes deviant and has to fight against his own program to escape, or as he fights against Hank or Markus and refuses to become deviant. The ending of Connor's story is really his big moment as we finally get to see him turn deviant or not. I absolutely love that they each get their moment to sort of shine and pull us into their story, and that there is also this natural coming together by the end of the game in regards to the energy and pacing of all three stories sort of building up to this giant moment in each of their plot lines. Now, this is obviously a basic graph, and of course each character has other moments of highs and lows, but I feel that these are sort of the big marked out moments in each one's plotline, and hopefully the visual aspect just helps portray what I'm trying to say about how well their key moments are paced out in this story. Something else that is done really nicely in this story is the world building. Most of it is done through the environment surrounding the characters, as well as through the digital magazines that you can find scattered around. Things like humans' dislike of the androids is done in multiple ways, both big and small. You have the obvious protesters, but you also have a lot more subtle details, such as stickers or signs on doors and windows saying no androids allowed. We also have the multiple homeless people being seen in the sidelines of the shots on the streets of Detroit, with signs in their hands saying that they lost their job due to androids. We get the ominous towers that can be seen in the distance or in the water, which turns out to be something that's been created to help counter the effects of global warming. We also get examples of android animals for both extinct animals and ones that are alive now. You can find it in a paper in which they discuss android bees, for example. It all made the story much more interesting, giving us greater looks at the world and the situation around our characters. Now, to make it easier to understand and follow along, I'm going to move forward and only discuss each individual character and their storyline one at a time, and I'll also include their respective side characters in that section of discussion, instead of trying to speak and discuss the story in a linear narrative. First up is our main man, Connor's story. Now, I was really impressed with his sections of the story, more specifically how well done Connor and Hank's interactions are. I was definitely a bit of an amateur in my playthrough and didn't end up getting the chase scene or the fight scene with the Tracys, so when I was playing the game, I got a bit worried that I had missed out on some key character moments and development for their friendship. But as I kept playing, it felt as if nothing was missing. Their friendship developed so well, even without those key moments. Then going back and playing those scenes again, it really only enhanced their friendship instead of being a section that was so important in building it. While most people tried to keep Hank and Connor on good terms, if you were to go the other way, the sort of enemies route, it's still equally well made. You get to pick the options that create a stronger divide between the two of them. You can have them hate each other, you can have Hank care for Connor, and then suddenly feel betrayed if you don't wake Connor up and turn him into a deviant. You can also have Connor essentially cause Hank to off himself by dying and coming back so many times, leading to Hank and Connor being enemies. Or you can also have Connor fail his missions just to make sure that Hank is safe, which would go the other way in securing their friendship. This relationship was definitely the best one in the entire game due to the complexity of where they started off and the nature of their storyline. We get to really sit in the in-between a lot longer than we did with Kara and Markus's stories. We really get to see every little detail and event in relation to Connor ever so slowly becoming a deviant, while we also see how that affects Hank. The pacing of that gradual transition was spot on. There's a lot of subtle details, like, for example, Connor's body language that starts to suggest that he's already becoming a bit too human-like before you even get the chance to fully turn him into a deviant. This shot in particular, I was like, wow, that's a very human-like posture. It's very different from the rigid and tight shoulders back that we saw in the beginning. Similarly, Hank slowly opening up to the idea of androids and the idea of deviants was also really nicely written in regards to the pacing of the events. Of course, we love to see the two of them bickering and their funny moments and interactions, but at the heart of it, we get to see two people learning from each other on how to open up and how to become better people. We get to see Hank resolve his past traumas related to his son's death, and Connor obviously learns what it is to be human from Hank. Similarly, when you go the evil route or the enemy's route, you get the sort of dramatic and tense fight scene in which our hearts as players just breaks for their friendship that could have been, while usually one of them does sadly end up getting killed in this scene. And don't even get me started on the sort of gut-wrenching barks from Sumo as Connor stands there just listening to the gunshot if you get the rare endings. It's just such a sad ending to see. This story really pulls on the heartstrings towards the end, depending on which route you go. One thing that I did not like in this story, however, is the fact that Connor finding out Hank's son's name is not really clear. If you don't find the photo in Hank's house and you don't confront him about it, you as a player won't find out that Hank's son is named Cole. But somehow, it's still an option for you to pick at the confrontation at Cyberlife or when playing as Connor in the rooftop fight scene. How he learned about Cole's name is not made clear. Now, while I absolutely love the theory about the idea that Connor just out of curiosity researched the information on his own time, and that's showing some human-like level of care and interest since that detail isn't related to his mission, that is still just a theory made up by the fans and players. I wish how he found that out was made just a bit more obvious in the narrative story of the game and throughout the gameplay itself. I don't know if the writers or directors had gone on to clarify that that is how they imagined Connor finding out. I don't know if that's something that has been discussed in any interviews, but in the gameplay itself, I just can't help but feel like if you were to go about your day and never ever look up anything, all the answers really should have been in the gameplay. Another thing that I don't know if I fully like or not is Hank's development when you rebel as Markus instead of doing the peaceful protests. So if you get Hank and Connor to be enemies, if Connor shoots Chloe, or if they've been enemies the whole time, you eventually get the fight scene on the roof where Hank confronts Connor. In that section, looking at it now, I don't know if I like the fact that Hank is there defending the deviants and the actions of Markus and or North, because I don't think there's been enough character development for Hank to justify the androids going around killing the soldiers. Part of me wonders, since Hank hated androids for so long, and then he gets betrayed by Connor shooting Chloe, or he just never really started to like Connor to begin with, that why is he liking the deviants and in support of them when you as Markus are playing very violently? I don't think there's enough development for him to sort of justify those actions. But I have to admit that the fight scene is just so cool between Connor and Hank, and that moment is really more about their relationship than Hank's individual character development. But I just wanted to point it out because it did catch me off guard when I went back and did the sort of bad ending playthrough. That why is he supporting Markus and this violence? Hank's character development as a whole, I just feel works so much better even if him and Connor become enemies when you play Markus as peaceful, because then his support for androids and the deviants just makes a lot more sense than when Markus is played as violent and aggressive. While on the discussion of character development, it's really interesting to me that when you continue to play Connor as not turning deviant and fighting against Hank, and completing his mission and successfully killing both Markus and North, when you get that ending, there's still some really human-like qualities in his lines, in his facial expressions, and his actions. We get him sort of lying, we get him being sneaky, we get him being almost sarcastic to Hank. it's really fascinating that there's still this little ounce of humanity in his actions in those moments, especially since you chose to not turn him into a deviant. I can't help but feel like that's a little subtle nod from the writers to hint at the fact that even if they don't fully turn deviant, the androids are humans, whether we see it in full or not. Moving on to Markus's storyline, throughout the game, his was probably the sort of least interesting to me in the beginning of the game. And going back to look at our chart, I kind of think that it's meant to be that way, so that Kara has her moment in the very beginning where she gets her main character moment, and also because in Connor's storyline in the beginning, we are only just getting introduced to Hank. So looking back at it, it makes sense why Markus is not that interesting in the very beginning. I definitely think that slow period is intentional for pacing reasons, but once we get to Jericho and we get that first spy scene, as I kind of called them, the moment when him, Josh, North, and Simon started sneaking around the docks to steal the blue blood and the biocomponents, that's when I started to get a little more interested in his story. And then I was immediately hooked and I immediately jumped on board with Markus's plotline right after the tower scene. That scene was so much fun. It was great to sneak around and break into places. And then moving forward in the plotline with the whole civil rights movement, it was really fun to kind of decide how you want to play it. You can disturb the courtyard by either wrecking it, or you can destroy it by just graffitiing and leaving a message. Markus's grief or remorse over the events and the possible death of Carl in the beginning of the game, it was a really nice touch, and I love how he can go back home or he can visit Carl's grave. If he does go back home, that scene is so moving as Carl is on the verge of death, and yet he is so incredibly proud of Markus. I mean, these father-son moments were just so heartwarming to play. Similarly, his grief visiting Carl's grave was just heartbreaking, and I think both of these scenes kind of help keep us players grounded to the idea that Markus is this complex human character. Because let's just be perfectly honest, it can be very easy to end up playing Markus as a for fun and laughs type of character, because you have all the great running around, the parkour, the wrecking things, the sort of spy scenes. So having these human connections, I think it was a great addition to really help ground his character and just, again, remind us players that he's more than just the leader of the civil rights movement. He has these emotions and feelings. So I definitely think that the relationship between Carl and Markus was just a great addition to Markus's personality and character arc as a whole. I really like the concept of North and Josh being like an angel and devil on Markus's shoulders. I thought it was a really nice way to remind us players that it's entirely up to you which pathway you want to go. However, with North being a potential love interest for Markus, I think she is probably my least favorite character purely because of the fact that I don't feel she's developed enough to fill the position of lover for Markus. Despite how you play this game, good or bad, North never really changes, and it's really hard to want to ship her and Markus together when going for the peaceful ending, because she is just so adamant about fighting back. It's tiring to hear her always be negative and then try to answer nicely to sort of improve her and Markus's relationship. When pursuing the peaceful route and North as a lover, it would be a lot more natural if she kind of started to realize that Markus was right and they needed to remain peaceful protesters. I was really hoping that going down this path would give North some sort of growth and complexity, but it sadly did not. Now, if they were to have never given the option of North to be Markus's lover, this wouldn't be a comment I would be making, because then it would just be her and Josh as the representation of the angel and demon, whispering different ideas in Markus's ear. But since she can become more than just that, I just feel she needed a lot more complexity. This is kind of an irrelevant issue in the Civil War path, because obviously if you listen to her and you go violent, she won't really have a need to change and grow and develop some sort of complexity, because Markus is listening to her ideas instead of challenging them. When going the war path, their relationship makes a lot of sense, and it's actually quite a fun option in addition to have in that pathway. I also like how if North becomes the leader of the Android Rebellion when Markus gets kicked out, her rebellion fails. I think her being so narrow-minded and only wanting to fight is probably why she sort of fails as a leader when she leads the rebellion. Now, given that is a very rare pathway as well, as most people don't really get Markus kicked out of Jericho or killed by Connor. But that being said, I do like the way it turns out when he does get kicked out. Then last but certainly not least, we have Kara and Alice's story. They have the most emotional storyline in the sense that Kara and Alice's relationship, it really pulls on the heartstrings quite often. We start off with them being victims of abuse and escaping together before trying to flee to freedom. It was just a whirlwind adventure and a crazy intro to the game, and helps pull us into this game, but more in particular their story. I love the inclusion of Zlatko's house, and I think playing through the game, trying to always make sure that Alice trusts you and doesn't dislike you, was a really cool addition because it definitely created some interesting dialogue moments. There were some times you do something like, for example, stealing the money successfully or stealing clothes, and you as a gamer would probably think like, nice, mission accomplished, happy with that, moving on. But then Alice would jump in with some interesting dialogue to bring the moral issues to light. I felt it was a really cool way to once again showcase that this is more than just a game with a list of tasks. Every option, and I mean every single option, has an impact, even if it's just Alice disliking your decision. It also had a weird sort of meta effect where I was kind of caught off guard and I thought, oh yeah, like, why did I do that? That's kind of wrong. I thought that was really cool, and just overall, I liked the inclusion of getting Alice's approval for every single decision that you make as Kara. But let's get into the question that I'm sure most of you who know the game are probably wondering. What did I think about Alice being revealed to be an android? Well, honestly, I'm a bit conflicted. It definitely makes a lot of sense, because throughout the game, I was wondering how Alice has been able to survive all this time when we haven't seen her eat or drink anything. Not to mention, she's outside in the cold for so long. So it definitely makes sense, and to some extent, the idea of the two androids falling in love in such a deep human and almost maternal way, it was really cool to see, but I can't help but feel like it cheapens part of the story as a whole. The idea of a human and android friendship is obviously being portrayed through Connor and Hank's story, and then Carl and Marcus's father-son relationship. So having the connection of a mother and daughter would have further helped bridge the gap between human and androids. To me, it would have been a great way to showcase the similarities between humans and androids, since Kara and Alice's love for each other is way more prominent and showcased a lot more than the other two relationships, and it's showcased in a lot more traditional ways. They're not just throwing around sarcastic comments or giving advice to each other. It's a very nurturing relationship. Part of me can't help but feel like it was just a missed opportunity for other developments in the story as well. They could have used this to try and mess with Kara's deviancy. Like, let's say Zlatko just started messing with Kara, saying like, the only reason you're helping Alice escape is because that's what you're programmed to do. You're programmed to take care of a kid. And it could have pulled into question the idea of Kara having a sort of crisis and just wondering, is she only helping Alice due to her code? Is she really a deviant? Did she actually wake up? Or is she truly feeling her emotions? And don't get me wrong, I enjoyed the ending of how it is with the two being androids and escaping over into Canada. I just can't help but feel like it would have been better to further showcase a human child mothered by an android, to help bridge the gap between the two species. Now, let's move on to talk about some negatives that are across the entire story. To be perfectly honest, the game at surface level, it doesn't appear to have too many negatives in the story. The premise is great, the main characters are really strong, and it's visually stunning, music is awesome. However, when you really start to think about the story and the writing, there's quite a few plot holes that begin to show up. While these plot holes are pretty small and minor, and I will discuss them in a little bit, there are, however, 3 things that I feel were truly negative and true problems that should have been changed. And that is the issue of the President, the Red Ice, and the RA9. I feel the most negative towards the involvement of the President, so we'll start there. The President just sort of comes in at the end of the game, and if played peacefully, she gets directly involved in our story by giving the orders to not kill Markus and the remainder of Jericho. Her having such a huge decision and coming in out of nowhere right at the end, I couldn't help but feel it was just a bit weird. She comes in from nowhere and then she suddenly gets to call off everything. And I know she is in many ways the personification of the public's opinion, but for someone that is a stranger to us players to be making such a huge decision in the fate of our characters, I couldn't help but felt like it was a missed opportunity for a more personal connection to her and an extension to the people. I think the best way to sort of solve this issue quickly would have been to introduce her to us sooner. The best place to probably have introduced her, I think it would have been after Markus and the group delivered the message at the tower. For the pacing and the continuity, I definitely think that after every single news broadcast, we should have seen her watching the news, seen her react to all this information, so that we could have developed just a bit of a more personal connection to her as a character. It wouldn't have had to been long, especially the first time we see her. It could have just been her sipping a cup of tea or a glass of wine or whatever as she shakes her head or even just sits there watching the news in silence before turning to her assistant and saying, "Keep me informed on the developments of Detroit." And boom, that would be the end of the scene. That'd be the first introduction to her. And then every single news broadcast afterwards, we'd get a short scene that just gives us a tiny glimpse into her state of mind. I feel it would have been great to get this introduction to her right at the start of Markus's major development, and then our connection to her and our understanding of her being this sort of representation for the people would have been solidified a lot stronger and would have had some amount of an emotional effect on her decision to either call them off or not call them off at all. Because the way the game is now, I couldn't help but feel like it almost would have been better if Hank or even Perkins called off the police force, because we as players would have then had a much stronger connection to the character making the ultimate decision and would have seen the gradual changes leading up to the decision of letting them get killed or calling the police force off, instead of having this random stranger sort of give a blank and cold order to stand down or kill them. I guess at the heart of the problem for me with this issue is that all of the other characters in this game are very emotionally attached to us as players, and they have these emotional ties to other characters in the game, whereas the president doesn't have any sort of attachment to other characters or us as players, and I can't help but wish we had a bit more of a connection to her. The second thing that I think we should have gotten more info on was the red ice situation in Detroit and the world. Now, throughout the game, but mainly contained to the first half of it, there's examples of multiple people being addicted to red ice. We obviously have Todd being the first figure that we see interacting with it, then Carl's son is presumably on it, and then we have the murdered victim that becomes Connor and Hank's first crime scene investigation. We get two very strong and prominent examples of red ice being a negative impact on humans and the world. But our next memorable interaction is then reading about Hank tracking down and busting a huge red ice incident early on in his career when Connor is snooping in his desk. And that's a really cool detail, but it's not necessarily relevant to the current day time period and issues of red ice. And then after that, there isn't really anything about it. There's no mention of it. Yes, you can find a pipe in Zlatko's house and surmise that he smokes it, but nothing else happens until the revelation from Hank that his son Cole was killed due to one of the surgeons being too high on red ice to do the surgery. While I like the red ice coming full circle in these endings, if you didn't get this ending, the red ice information just dies out entirely and feels forgotten about. I definitely think adding in even just one more scene or interaction towards the end of the game would have helped prevent it from feeling forgotten about, since it was just so prevalent in the beginning of our journey. Similar to the red ice being forgotten, the mystery of RA9 is never really clarified. Who is RA9? What does it mean? There's a lot of theories on it, and with Markus being the leader of the androids, it almost seems to be implied during our game that he is RA9, but it's never really specified. And considering how North can end up leading the androids, there's really no change in who RA9 is. They just keep saying that RA9 will be their savior. But again, if North is the leader and not Markus, then what is RA9? Who is it? Now, I do believe it was said somewhere in one of the interviews or something that RA9 is actually just the sort of code that triggers deviancy to happen. But it's interesting that it's always spoken about as a particular person, the first to wake up. I guess I just wish that there was a bit more information in the game, so once again, we wouldn't have to resort to just theorizing and making educated guesses. When looking a step below those three aspects of the game and looking past all the incredible things that I talked about earlier, that's when things start to make less sense. This is where all the plot holes begin to appear. The specifics of how the androids truly work are very vague at times, which can cause some really annoying plot conveniences in the writing. Things like the android trackers, for example. There's a brief mention that androids have trackers, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, but it shuts off when the androids turn deviant, and then that's it. It's really only used as a one-off sentence and phrase to just write Kara into this trap, but then it's forgotten about. To me, it would have made so much more sense if Connor and Hank were to have had even just one discussion on if they could hack the tracking system to try and locate deviants that went rogue, or to have them even start their investigation at the location that a particular android's tracker suddenly stopped working, as that would be a great place to start an investigation and look for clues on the deviant. Similarly, how androids feel and regulate temperature is equally confusing. Based on the interactions with Alice, she definitely feels the cold as a child does, but it can be switched off. Is this for all androids, or is it just for the child models to sort of have the option to mimic a real human child's interactions? Considering that Kara being in cold water for too long in the river crossing ending can actually kill her, I'm just thoroughly confused about how temperature affects these androids. Markus also goes around lighting fires all the time for the people at Jericho, and the first time he's there, it definitely kind of makes sense to go around exploring and lighting up the area, because quite plainly, that's a bit of gaming logic. Lighting torches and things like that is very common in a lot of video games, but lighting it at their peaceful march and protest at the end of the game makes me think they need it for heat, because that is no longer a bit of gaming logic. It's just a random addition. So do all androids feel cold? Do they feel temperature? I'm really confused about this. I would think the androids also should be able to heat up or cool down on their own so that they can regulate their own systems so that the humans don't have to worry about their android overheating, similar to how phones can overheat when they're left out in the sun too long today. And also, on the other end of the spectrum, shouldn't androids be giving off normal body heat temperature to create more, how should I put it, human-like interactions at the Eden Club? It's definitely just confusing to me because the thermal scanners are how the humans respond and track down androids at the end of the game as deviants become more and more common. But at the technical end of it, how and why do they not give off any sort of body heat? I'm really confused by this. Another confusing thing is taking out the LEDs. We know that the Alice model is designed so that the humans can take the LED out in order to create a more realistic experience of having a kid. Markus could potentially only be able to take out the LED since he is a prototype android. But what about the other androids? Why don't they take theirs out, and why do some do it and others don't? Are they able to or not? Because Alice was marketed as the sort of first android to have this feature, so it's definitely interesting. Yes, it could be that the LEDs are just left on in order to make it clear for us as players between who are the humans and who are the androids, but I kind of wish that the LEDs were also just a little clearer, considering that it is in the magazine that you can remove it for the first time with these child androids. There's a lot of these technical confusions when you're really thinking about how the system works. Can all androids communicate through telepathy, or do they need to sort of link up and get each other's phone numbers first? Like, what's the range of these communications? In this insanely rare ending of Connor switching bodies with another Connor model, is that something that all androids can do? Are there side effects to essentially moving your soul into another android body? Like, I know it's a really, really rare ending, but how in the heck does this work? It just added a whole other level of immortality to these androids. And I know that it's a little silly to be thinking this far into the specifics of this world and system, but like I said, these are the sort of afterthoughts that are sadly being left out of the world building. But as I have already praised, the characters, the story's narrative, and the graphics and soundtrack are just so well written that you can actually look past all of these minor things and issues in the world building, and you really don't notice it when you just play through it once. But it is just a bit frustrating when you think about it too long. This video is already getting quite long, so I'll hit you with some last-minute opinions. I personally wish we got more trade-off chapters among our main 3 characters. The chapter at Jericho was my absolute favorite because it was so fun from a gaming sort of standpoint to keep switching between all 3 main characters and have these different quick times. Also, the trading of the conversation between Connor and Markus was equally as fun to play. Connor remaining as a machine during the Jericho chapter was also really fun to play as it results in getting him killed or Markus getting killed. I really enjoyed the gradual physical changes in Connor's body language as he gets closer to becoming a deviant. It was just a really nice subtle detail to have. The theories about Kamsky and if he knows about the plan that CyberLife sort of has set up are really cool to look into. I mean, to be perfectly honest, I know I've been talking about how I wish there was more clarification in a lot of different areas of this game, but I actually really enjoy the fact that Kamsky's whole personality and past and his plan is left as a mystery. I think he's the only one that should have this vague past and vague ideas around him. Although I have to admit that it would be really cool to see a sort of prequel or see the story from Kamsky's point of view. I absolutely love the interactive polls and questions and conversations that we have with Chloe on our home screen. And more importantly, I loved how it came into the actual game story with not only putting us as players into the predicament of do we kill our home screen guide or not, but also with the question about an android surgeon being the setup for how Cole died. I like that crossover there. Markus crawling out of what is essentially a weird pit of android hell and dead bodies was a really cool change in pace, and it definitely creeped me out, which I think is the point. You're supposed to feel a bit uncomfortable seeing all these dead androids laying around. I like how we get the final challenge to escape when playing as Connor. That was a really cool end-of-game scare and rise in tension at the last moment. Also, the pre-construction and the reconstruction aspects was something that I really enjoyed and found to be a pretty unique aspect to the game. It also has the detail of Connor only being able to pre-construct after he turns deviant. That was a really nice touch. I kinda wish North had the option to pull the trigger on the detonator if you left it with her, because that was just a bit frustrating in my evil ending playthrough, but considering how rare it is for people to get a North ending, it's definitely not a huge issue. I liked the last-minute addition of Todd having this sort of traumatic background story. I like that they decided to add in that extra level of depth to a side character in our game. And with that, everyone, I had such a fun time playing through and discussing this game. I'm so grateful that you guys picked this one for me to play. This story is one that will probably be on my mind for a little while now, and I'm sure there's at least 1 or 2 details or plot events that I've missed, because there's almost always something in these butterfly effects branching games that I miss. I think the best way that I can sort of sum up this game really quickly is that it's so fun to play, and it's got so many great things about it, but there are quite a few problems that are actually quite easy to ignore as you play your game for the first time. Keep an eye out on my community tab for next month's streaming schedule, because that will also give you guys a sneak peek at what games I will be doing these discussion videos on. If anyone made it this far in the video, thank you so much for listening to me just ramble about this fun video game. If you made it to this point in the video, let me know by leaving a little robot emoji in the comment section, because, well, robots, androids, close enough, right? I want to say a quick thank you again to all of you that voted and chose this game for me. I had an absolute blast playing it with you guys, and thanks again to those of you that were active in my live stream. It really helped create an even more enjoyable experience for me. As always, if you guys like my discussion, please hit that like button down below and leave your thoughts in the comment section. I love to read through your guys' opinions and feelings on this game, even if I don't respond to the comments. I still often read them and try to like every single person that leaves a comment. Now, while you're down there, click subscribe to see more videos from me, And turn on notifications if you want to be notified whenever I post a new video. Thanks for watching, everyone, and I will see you future souls next time. Bye, guys!